Molly Picon was a peanut-sized, 4'10", they said, maybe less, but she was a powerhouse. Her footprint on Yiddish culture and American culture was enormous. And we're going to not only hear her music today, sung by the amazing cantor Lynn Torgove, accompanied by Judith Lynn Stillman and Nat Seelan, but we're going to learn a lot about Molly's life and how she became the superstar that she eventually was. After the program, we invite you to come downstairs. There's a nosh in the foyer of the meeting house. You just head down the stairs. If you're not familiar with the building, you just go out and down and then turn left. You'll see where the food is. And you can talk with the artists. You can ask Cantor Torgove about her vast research on Molly Picon's life. And without further ado, please welcome the performers.
Eins, zwei, drei. A bisschen Sinn, a bisschen Regen, ruhig auf dem Kopf zu legen, a biegesinnt, kann man glücklich sein. A Schuche Sorg, a klein und lattes, a Geschene, a drei, vier Rates, a biegesinnt, kann man glücklich sein. Die Luft ist frei, für jeden Lach. Die Sonne, die scheint für jeden einem Arm oder Reich. Ein bisschen Freude, ein bisschen Lachen, einmal mit Freunden Schnäpsel machen, ab wie gesinnt, kann man glücklich sein. Thank you all for coming. Some of you know that song. It's one of Molly Picon's most beloved melodies and has shown up in recordings by the Barry Sisters, klezmer bands, and of all sizes and shapes, including Cab Calloway. Cab Calloway has a song called A Bee Gesinnt, and he sings the words anyway, in the song. You have to hear it. Today we'll be hearing and seeing and learning a lot about the incredible, indomitable, and unsinkable Molly Brown. The overture, please. Thank you. Molly Picon, the Yiddish musical and film star, the darling of Second Avenue Yiddish theater, Molly Picon survived and thrived through 9 decades of performing for Jewish and non-Jewish audiences. Born in 1898 on the Lower East Side of New York City, Molly Picon became the quintessential bellwether of the assimilation, the cultural negotiation, and the evolution of the Eastern European Jew in America. Though she grew up in a Yiddish theater, she was different from many of the European-born performers of the early music theater. Molly was born in America, and most of the Yiddish starlets of the day had been born in Europe. They weren't 4'11", and they weighed more than 95 pounds. She was born, she liked to emphasize her Eastern European roots, however. She says, "My grandparents came from a little town in Russia that looked like a sneeze in print and is pronounced the same way. Near Kiev in the Pale of Settlement." She didn't go back to those roots until 1920, at the age of 22, when she traveled to Europe to improve her Yiddish. Because of that difference, Molly was the perfect mayor of the city, straddling both sides of American and European Jewish cultural divide. Molly Picon was a quintessential American Jew, reflecting the complex journey of Jews in America in the 20th century. Through it all, from her youthful portrayals of mischievous teens to her final years when she was everybody's booby, she remained a role model and a rule breaker, unsinkable. Now, we're going to see, here's Molly being interviewed by the talk show host Mike Douglas in 1980.
You know, besides starring in hit Broadway musicals like Milk and Honey and movies like Fiddler on the Roof, my next guest also spent her early years on the vaudeville stage and, of course, is one of the biggest stars of the Yiddish theater. She fit a lot of living into one life, and she fit it all between the covers of this book. Here is super senior Molly Picon. I like your outfit.
Yes,
Thank you.
That is
Nice.
nice.
Beautiful.
Did you design that, Molly?
No, Eduardo is my tailor, and he makes these things special for me so I can sit down in them comfortably.
You look wonderful.
Well, here I am with the boys.
Good boy. You've worked with Mr.
I
Jessel.
worked with Jessel. I've known Jessel all his life and all my life, but this is my first
That's
time
all.
of meeting with George Raft.
My
Glad
pleasure.
to know you, sir.
Glad to know you.
Okay, now
I
we
didn't
better
get a
be
chance to see you on Second Avenue because I was working all night in
And you
nightclubs.
wouldn't have known the language either in
No,
those
I
days.
wouldn't.
George did, yeah.
How long have you been in show business, Molly?
Here we go. 76 years.
Wow.
Is that longer than you, George?
I've got underwear older than that.
One of Molly's greatest achievements was starring in the film Yidden Mitten Fiddle from 1936. It took Molly 23 years to get from the vaudeville theaters of Philadelphia to international movie stardom. Maybe you've heard this one of her most favorite songs from that movie. It goes, Yidden Mitten Fiddle, out your mitten bars, das Leben is a little tovu. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's go back to the very beginning. Act 1, from the all-American girl to Yiddische Malka, the queen. Molly was born, Molly Picon, on February 28, 1898, on the Lower East Side of New York City on Broome Street. She would have been 125 years old 2 days from today. Her parents affectionately called her Molly Darling. Molly was raised along with her sister Helen by their mother, Clara Ostrovsky, who arrived in New York from Ukraine in 1890, just ahead of the pogroms. Molly's father, Louis O. Picon, later Picon, had studied for the rabbinate in Warsaw, leaving behind his studies when he came to America. Besides leaving behind those studies, however, it seems he also left something else behind, a wife and children. Molly Picon recounts that she thought her father was disappointed that she had been a girl. She says, well, as for Papa, well, Papa was disdainful of life in general, and I think of me in particular. He just faded out of our lives. Never did he ever hug or kiss Helen or me. I was and still am sorry we never really knew Papa. After Molly's sister was born, he left something else behind again, his family in America. Molly, Helen, and their mother, Clara, soon moved to Philadelphia. Clara found work in costume departments in Philadelphia's Yiddish theaters. This is a photo of Molly and her younger sister Helen showing off their mother's handiwork. Molly had her theatrical debut at age 5 when her mother entered her in an amateur acting competition at the Bijou Theater in Philadelphia. Little did she know what a stage mother could do. The story of that fateful audition goes like this. Molly dressed in a red pleated dress with a fake muff fur. It must have looked something like this. She and her mother rode the trolley to the competition, and on their way to the theater, they found a drunk riding in the same car with them, and he demanded that Molly perform for him right then and there. Well, Molly took the dare. She performed her number and spontaneously ended with an impression of the drunk himself. An impression that the drunk was very impressed with, and so impressed that he passed the hat to raise pennies for her. At the audition, she concluded her set number with an impromptu impression of the drunken man on the trolley. Well, she took first prize, and so began her career. When Molly arrived home, she reports that her grandma nodded her head and said quietly to her mother, "Clara, there are maybe 5 or 6 theaters in Philadelphia. Better you should keep her on the trolley cars." Soon after, Molly became a featured act in Jewish theaters all over Philadelphia. Here she is in Fagin's Decision in 1911 in the Nickelodeon vaudeville acts, of course, with a puppy. Molly spent her youth on stage performing spunky song and dance routines in all-American amateur nights, local Nickelodeon theater acts, Yiddish theaters, and of course, trolley cars. She performed all through grade school, but when she got to high school, she finally decided she had to leave school. She was just too exhausted from going to school during the day and performing every night. She writes in her autobiography, "Perhaps if I had been Louis Picon's son, I would have had a classical education and been a scholar. Instead, as the wardrobe mistress's daughter, I got the love of the stage, because there I could make believe I was all the things I could never be in real life." Now Molly hits the vaudeville touring road and heads to Boston. Molly wanted to expand her theatrical career beyond Philadelphia, and eventually, in 1918, she was cast in a touring English language vaudeville performance called The Four Seasons. She played the part of Winter. You can see her in the center of the photo, very adorable sitting there. She is very adorable. The Four Seasons toured small-time vaudeville circuits across the country, but by the winter of 1918, the Four Seasons cast had arrived in Boston nearly broke. They found also that all of the theaters had been closed, because you may remember what happened in 1918 in Boston. The Spanish flu pandemic. It closed every single theater in the city, except for one, the Grand Opera House. So Molly, out of work and broke, headed over to the theater to look for a train fare or for a job. When she arrived at the theater, she found not this, but a rundown, second-rate building surrounded by brothels. Not so grand. By the way, for those of you who know Boston, the theater was located on Washington Street underneath the elevated trolley. It's there that Molly and her future husband would go walking hand in hand. She asked to speak to the person in charge and was greeted by Jacob Kalick, the manager of the theater. He also hung the lights, built the set, and paid the bills. When she inquired about a job, Jacob, known as Yonkel, told her that the company was looking for a new member of the troupe, a flamme feierlich Soubrette, a fiery, lively ingenue. Well, at 4'11" she fit the bill and got the part. Molly and Yankel fell in love the same year. Here's a photo of Molly and Yankel from a postcard taken when they were young lovers, and a photo of the two of them on the set of the 1971 movie Fiddler on the Roof, where Molly played Yente. Now, Yankel was 7 years her senior, better educated and more experienced and European. Molly was a brash, gutsy American, the perfect partnership. Well, maybe not. But that said, it lasted a lifetime and created extraordinary Yiddish theater and film. In 1919, she married Yankel Kalik, and he became her lifelong husband and manager. She says, "I always said influenza was our matchmaker. I was the all-American girl and absolutely illiterate about Jewish culture. Yankel, on the other hand, was the complete intellectual who knew not only classic Yiddish, but its plays, theaters, and writers. It was a funny situation. I was trying to make him a real American guy, and he was trying to make me a Yiddish mama, but it was fun." During the next year, while Molly was trying to get work in New York, she suffered a heartbreaking miscarriage and was told that she would be unable to bear children. She was devastated. Jacob suggested that the two of them head to Europe for an extended tour. He thought that she might be too American to achieve success on New York's 2nd Avenue. Yankel wanted to take Molly to Europe so that she could become, well, more Yiddish. "I was the all-American girl," she acknowledged. "The Yiddish I spoke was completely bastardized." Starting in Paris, Yankel created the star vehicle, Yankele, that would turn Molly into an international celebrity. Molly played the part of a 13-year-old mischievous boy, and the audiences fell in love with her. She toured the great theaters of Europe, Vienna, Kishinev, Bucharest, London, to rave reviews. She writes, "As Yiddish was our center, our link, I never felt like a complete stranger in Europe because I was always in the midst of a familiar language and heritage, the Yiddish world." By the time she returned to the United States 2 years later, her fame had already preceded her. When Molly and Yankel returned to the United States, she took the Yiddish theater by storm. From 1922 to 1925, she worked with every major theater composer, including Joseph Rumshinsky and Abe Elstein. She often wrote the lyrics herself as well. She appeared in many productions up and down 2nd Avenue. Mamala, Razala, The Girl from Yesterday, The Radio Girl. Oi, is das a Mädel? Oi, what a girl. My Mankala and The Circus Girl. She also brought her great European success, Yankele, to American audiences. Here she is singing the title song from Yankele.
Die pakt mir a jeder, denkt wie ein Nebenkind. A Pistol hab ich auf Schreifen, bin jeder lieb ich ans Läufen. Ich bin doch a Masik, a Jingele, a Quatsch. Pink wie a Kalsik, mit jedem Panje bracht. Jeder von mir, zittelt und a Schier, wenn man sieht mich auf der Gas. Schreit men bald auf mir. Oi, 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 oi. Oh, steht Yankele. Dort steht Yankele. Weil ist a Jingele, a Gitarre. in seiner Säu wie Jankerle.
Abe Elstein's operetta called Bubbeleh, which means little bagels. I'm not sure what the operetta was about besides the bagels. It was an operetta though, so it was made up of lots of different kind of vignettes. In it starred Molly Picon and the heartthrob Aaron Lebedev. I don't know if any of you know that name. In a newspaper review, the song Die alte Zigeuner, the old gypsy, was reported as a highlight of the show.
Dort auf der Bergelein zu den freien Himmel, weit von dem ruschigen Staatsgerimmel, steht sich Chatkin allein auf dem Ort, ein alter Zigeuner wohnt dort. Vergeht sich der alte Zigeuner mit seinem ganzen Feier und Brand. Nur wir Zigeuner kennen. Zigeuner Melodie ist so schön, hört es, vergisst es nicht, nein, weil sie ist warmherzig viel mit Chien. Auf Wunderkraft, sie gibt euch Liebe und euch Leidenschaft, hört es nur einmal, gibt keine mehr Ruhe. Zwerggeschäft euch die Melodie. Wenn die Tanz ist keiner Dieb und hat sich dann gar nicht kein Begriff, wie tritt und den schon mit tief von jeder Zeit. Sie fleckt euch an mit Lust und Fröhlichkeit und halten will die Rebikone die Klangen von die Melodie. Wenn der Zigeuner spielt zu, sein Liedl sin Herz geht a Brie, von seine Fiedel der Klang, der weckt deine Schummels Verlang, dein Blut, es kocht und es sieht, sein Fiedel dem Beugen erzieht, nimmt in die Himmeln schweben, es Lust sich zu leben, das Leben hat und also geht. Dem die Himmeln schweben, es Lust sich nur zum Leben, das Leben wird dann also geht. Das ist dem alten Zigeuners Lied.
I'm going to take a drink of water. Act 2. Molly and the Silver Screen, back to Europe. Now, our Molly was not content to conquer only the Yiddish theater stage. In 1923, she and Yankel were invited to travel back to Vienna, one of the creative centers of the burgeoning Yiddish film industry, to star in the silent film East and West, or Ost und West in German, or Mizrach and Merev in Yiddish. It was a huge hit. Ost and West is the oldest surviving Yiddish film and is comic commentary on the modern Western American Jew and the antiquated, old-fashioned Eastern European Jew. Written by Jacob, her husband, and directed by the great American director Sidney Golden, Molly plays a brash Jewish American flapper. Her character is even named Molly, who is dragged by her Polish-born father back to the old country for a family wedding. Molly is shocked by the Jews she finds there. She mocks them, she teases them, she questions their traditions, and is perfectly and adorably insufferable. Of course, Reuben, played by Yankel, the yeshiva bocher, falls miserably and impossibly in love with Molly. In this scene, Molly teaches the whole crowd, the yeshiva students, the cook, and her husband, the Charleston. Later in the film, Molly participates in a Yom Kippur day of fasting and praying. She sits in the women's section with a paperback romance novel tucked right into the pages of her machzor, the Yom Kippur prayer book. When she is too bored and too hungry to sit anymore, she heads to the kitchen, where she finds the feast prepared for the breakfast at the end of Yom Kippur. She has no idea what the food is for, and she's starving. So she devours all the food reserved for the breakfast. And what she doesn't eat, she gives to the family dogs. A shande! Later, after the services are over, the family comes in to prepare the breakfast meal and finds that all the food is gone. The family cook is furious with Molly and screams and yells at her. But Molly is so angry at being chastised and punished that she goes to her room, gets her boxing gloves, which somehow she had brought with her all the way from America to Poland, comes back to the kitchen and knocks out the old cook. For a final jest, Molly decides to stage a fake wedding to teach the lovesick Uncle a lesson. However, it turns out that it was a real wedding, and Molly convinced Uncle to go through with the whole sham wedding and give her a ring, and he puts it on her finger. Well, Molly and Uncle became man and wife. Ack! Molly is horrified and begs to be released from the union. As a compromise, she's allowed to leave Europe for 5 years to think about her situation, on the condition that she return to receive the divorce papers or decide to stay if she still wants. Meanwhile, Reuben, lovesick, decides to leave the shtetl. He goes to Vienna to stay with his uncle, changes his name to Ben-Ami, shaves his side locks, and becomes a celebrated scholar and author, just like that. When Molly finally returns to Europe by way of Vienna, she goes to a lecture with her uncle, where she meets an erudite, educated, handsome young scholar named Ben-Ami. She immediately falls in love with him. It is the same guy. It is arranged that Reuben and Ben-Ami will come to claim his bride. He disguises himself as the former side-locked Talmud scholar, and he hands her the divorce papers. As it turns out, the document is actually an explanation that Ben-Ami and Reuben are one and the same person. Molly no longer wants a divorce after all, and the two kiss. East becomes west, and the two are joined in love and harmony forever. Now, the most important film is coming up here. Yiddle Mitten Fiddle. Boy meets girl meets boy dressed as a girl. Was it a boy? Is it a girl? Well, this is Molly's most important theme and her most important film in 13 years later, in 1936, Yiddle Mitten Fiddle. Directed by Joseph Green, a Polish-born Jew who had emigrated to the United States, with lyrics by the great Yiddish poet Itzik Manger and music by the celebrated Abe Elstein. Yiddle was the most commercially successful musical in the history of Yiddish film. Molly plays Yiddle, a young Jew from Kazimierz, a Polish town in the Pale. In this clip, she is in the town marketplace in Kazimierz. Watch how the director, Joseph Green, in a remarkable innovation, combines actual footage of a Yiddish marketplace with the staged scene of Yiddle playing the fiddle to earn some pennies. Because Molly's papa doesn't have enough money to pay the rent, they both decide to make a living traveling the countryside as klezmorim, Yiddish musicians. But her father is afraid that it may be too dangerous for a young girl to travel on the road. So they decide that she should dress up as a boy, a role that Molly has already played all over Europe and 2nd Avenue. Do I look like a boy yet? Wait. With Molly in pants, they hitch a ride on a hay wagon and sing this life-affirming melody.
Über Felder, Wegen, auf Verwogenheit, mit Sonne und Wind und Regen, fuhren Klezmersweg. Ach, Jiddisch, oi, ach, Jiddisch, such wer seinen See. Jil mitten Fiedel, je mitten Bass, das Leben ist ein Liedl, so wusch seinen Kass. Hey, Jidl, Fiedel, Schmiedel, hey, das Leben ist ein Spaß. A Zick steht auf die Leunke und mecket treurig, meh. Hey, du Zick, du Scheute, treurig sein ist weh. Schokolade, das Bärdl, tacke, tacke, feh. Lidl, mitten, Fiedel, Arjen, mitten, Bass, das Leben ist ein Liedl, da wusch seinen Kass. Hey, Jidl, Fiedel, Schmiedel, hey, das Leben ist ein Spaß. A Vogel fliegt geht morgen, na geht Jur, dem Treuer und die Sorgen, dem Wind ein alter Schur, dem Wind lachen Punem und jeder fuhr, jeder mitten Fiedel, Arje mitten Bass, das Leben ist ein Liedl, da wusch seinen Kass. Hey, Jidl, Fiedel, Schmiedel, hey, das Leben ist ein Spaß. Hey, Jidl, Fiedel, Schmiedel, hey, das Leben ist ein Spaß. Hey!
Now, Yidel makes a pretty convincing boy in knee pants, a cap, and even manages to fool another father-son duo whom they meet while making music in a Polish town. This is more, you're going to see more archival footage, real footage. They begin playing together in an apartment courtyard, and you'll see the inhabitants leaning out of the windows. And they like the way they sound together, all four of them. Yes. The foursome decide to join together and travel the Polish countryside together making music. The trouble begins when Molly falls in love with the other son.
Wenn zerspielt sich auf sein Fiedel, ach, schön herzig jiddisch Liedl. Oi, Mama, wär mir gut ohne Schiel. Mit seine schöne schwarze Augen hat dann jetzt zugezogen. Oi, Mama, wohl geht es mir. Und wenn sagt, hey, du Mädel, bist doch so lieb und edel, und sein Spielen kriegt den Herzen heran. Will sich tanzen, will dich singen, oi, gewaltig wird zerspringen, ohne ihm und kann ich mehr nicht sein. Oi, Mama, bin ich verliebt. Oi, Mama, bin ich verliebt. A kleines Mängel, Mama getreue, liegt mir nur in Sinn. Ich wein und lach und weiß nicht, Mama, auf welche Welt ich bin. Oi, oi, Mama, bin ich verliebt. Oi, Mama, bin ich verliebt. Ich wollte die ganze Welt herumgehen nehmen und so direkt zu mich. Oi, Mama, bin ich verliebt. Oi, Mama, bin ich verliebt. Oi, Mama, bin ich verliebt. Ich wollte die ganze Welt herumgenommen und zugedrückt zu mich. Oi, Mama, bin ich verliebt.
During their travels, they play for a Jewish wedding. Molly says this about the filming of that scene with the town local inhabitants. The wedding scene took over 30 consecutive hours to film. The food had to be truly kosher because we hired Orthodox Jewish men, women, and children of Kazmierz to be the guests. As we filmed, they ate. And for the successive shots of the table, the food had to be replenished. And they ate over and over and over again. Our poverty-stricken guests couldn't figure out what was happening. They thought they had been invited to a real wedding.
Wie ist Ruhe?
Now, the bride doesn't look very happy in this scene, as you can tell. But there is a whole secondary plot that goes on that you're going to have to watch the movie in order to figure it out. By the end of the film, you have to see the whole film, it's just spectacular. Molly has taken off her boy's hat and clothing and has made her name for herself as a comic actress in Warsaw. She and Froyem, that's the name of the fiddle player that she fell in love with, they chance to meet, this is crazy, on an ocean liner heading for America, both in fancy modern dress. The two finally embrace as a dance band plays a hybrid version of their ensemble's klezmer repertoire, with added blue notes and set to a Latin beat. Now, the last film that Molly and Yankel made in Europe. Molly never changes because she doesn't, but Europe grows more grotesque with Bubbeleh. Bubbeleh, Little Mother, made in 1938. Molly Picon and Jacob Kalik returned to Poland in 1938 to film this movie, Bubbeleh. This Jewish musical comedy was the last Jewish film made in Poland before the Nazi onslaught. At 40, Picon plays a young girl of 12. That's what I mean when she doesn't really change. She plays a girl of 12, Chavshi, whose mother dies and leaves her to take care of her large and very unappreciative family, a role she had already created on stage 10 years earlier. The film took on special poignancy as she and Kalik struggled to capture the endangered shtetl culture on the eve of World War II. Molly reports, Poland had begun to feel like Germany. Hatred of Jews was everywhere. The film begins with Molly playing the young daughter, Chavshi, in a big family in Lodz, Poland. Her mother has passed away, and her dying wish is that Molly take care of the family. She does, and they don't appreciate it. In a wonderful scene, Molly is getting ready for Shabbos, making challah, ironing linens, boiling potatoes. This song that you're going to hear is often performed with unending joy and playfulness, which it contains, it is. But watch what happens at the end of the scene.
A bissel Wind, a bissel Regen, a ruhig auf dem Kopf zu legen, aber wir sind, können glücklich sein. A Schicha sagt, a Kleidung läuft es, ein Kästchen, a drei Pils läuft es, aber wir sind, können glücklich sein. Die Luft ist frei, für jeden gleich. Die Wind, sie scheint für jeden eine Murmelrei. Bist du frei, ein bisschen lachen, am mit Freund das Schnäpsel machen, wie gesinnt, kann man glücklich sein. Einer sich das Schier ist, einer sich Gebier ist, einem in die ganze Welt. Einer meint, das ganze Glück hängt nur auf dem Geld. Soll mal sichern, soll mal kriechen, nur ich tracht von mir. Ich darf es auf Kapur ist, weil das Glück steht am Tier. Ein bisschen Sinn, ein bisschen Regen, ein ruhig auf dem Kopf zu legen, wie gesinnt, kann man glücklich sein. Ich habe so ein Kleid und Lass ist ein Käschen, ja, 3, 4 Slots, das hab ich gesehen, kann man glücklich sein. Schweigt mir neueste Link. Oi, heiß ist heiß mit euch zu halten, als man ist verliebt, lust man auf den Kalten. Oi, weh mir Wasser ist doch nass, heinte kein Englisch ist sich leben wie ein Hint auf dem Gas. Tinkel, tinkel wie ein Keiler, als man ist verliebt, kriegt man linken Fehler. Oi, gedaan, de Galle. A bigge Wind kann man glücklich sein.
Now, Molly eventually takes charge. She reveals her sister's boyfriend as a crook and threatening him with a pistol, really a fork stuck in her pocket, she throws him out. But before that, she falls in love with someone else unattainable, the handsome and wholesome violin player Schlesinger. Across the alleyway, well, he is unattainable because Molly is trying to set him up with her party-going sister, Berta, who is gallivanting around town with the guy I just mentioned, the gangster Max Katz. Molly is very protective of her sister, but jealous too. Her sister has all the fun. Molly finds some of her mother's old clothing and gets dressed up to go out with her sister and Max, but when she does, everybody laughs at her. Depressed and feeling like she will never have any luck in her life, she sings by the window.
Nou, kijk, is een te heid en vijf zich kind.
Je wil dat zijn handen vreten. Ja, wat nou, meneer? Wat is er nou?
Scheint einmal für jeden und es kommt und die Nacht bleib ich sitzen in Tracht, noch ein Tag ist schon wieder vorbei. Und der Cholem, wo es ist, hat gecholmt vor sich, ist weg mit dem Wind auf das Land. Masel, es scheint einmal für jeden und nicht für mir. Masel, die bringst jeden Frieden. Farvus versäumst du mein Tier. Oi, wie es tut Banke jede Schau. Das Leben vergeht und keine Hoffnung, ihr sollt's nicht tun. Masel, es scheint einmal für jeden, nur nicht für mich.
Now, Molly had just been bullied all she could stand. She couldn't bear to have her family yelling at her anymore. She couldn't stand to have her sister going out with Max Katz. So one day, Max Katz comes to pick up her sister, and Molly takes him and sits him down in the chair and ties his hands behind him. She takes out this fork, she sticks it in her pocket, and she threatens him that if he ever comes back to that kitchen again, she'll shoot him. Well, he left. It's quite amazing. She throws him out, and she tells her family that she has had enough of their ingratitude. She storms out of the house, followed by another Freum. Freum, the violin player across the alley who she has been in love with all this time. Turns out that he's been in love with her as well. He takes her away to the countryside and proposes to her. She returns to her family, and just as she is leaving for her wedding, she turns back to the kitchen to check the soup for the wedding, now grown from a little mamala to mama. Now that was 1938. So what happens after that? There's no more Yiddish films happening. Yiddish theater is changing. Immigration from Eastern Europe has stopped, and the war in Europe grows darker and darker and more deadly. Molly continues to remake herself without losing her devotion to Yiddish and Yiddishkeit. She still performs Yiddish theater, but sometimes now it is in a combination of English and Yiddish. So you see, as the Jews move to the suburbs, Molly goes with them. The times change and the languages mingle. You can still hear it today, can't you? Yiddish words moved from being used only by Yiddish speakers to celebrities, the guy who ran the newsstand, and even American presidents, sportscasters, you name it. Everybody is speaking Yiddish. Now, when Yiddish theater continues to fade, which it did, eventually it couldn't stand the tide of American culture taking over. She takes her Yiddishkeit to the airwaves and stars in her own radio show, sponsored by Maxwell Coffee House. You can still hear some of these, some of the archives of these radio recordings. It was like a variety show in front of the microphone. When Yiddish theater also then becomes less and less and less Yiddish, it becomes very American. Even Americans and Yiddish audiences are listening to the Yiddish radio station WEVD. How many of you here listen to WEVD? Yeah. Yes. Whole families gathered around the radio to hear Molly sing, introduce guests, and to play in little skits. Now, she also performed on the nightclub stage and on the stage of Carnegie Hall. So here you can see her. This is Carnegie Hall. Somehow they turned it into a nightclub. I'm not sure how they managed to make that work. As she even makes star appearances in television sitcoms, this is for you, Pam, bringing the Irish cops to the world of Yiddish in Car 54, Where Are You? Now, this episode is very interesting because it's about the demolition of the New York ethnic, including Yiddish, neighborhoods, and the building of its replacement, Co-op City. Molly has moved into her new apartment before it is finished because, of course, she signed the lease, and the lease said she could sign in on that day. She moves up in a freight elevator up to an apartment that has no windows yet and sets up house. Now, the cops come by, they take the lift and try to evict her, but they end up eating babka and learning to sing. You can see this whole episode on YouTube.
Hold up in the Bronx, Brooklyn's broken out in fights. There's a traffic jam in Harlem that's backed up to Jackson Heights. There's a scout troop short a child, cruise ships do and I go wild. Car 54, where are you?
Auf dem Pripyat brennt a fire in den Stiebes heiß. In der Rebbe lernt kleine Kinderlach, dem Alef Beis. In der Rebbe lernt kleine Kinderlach, der Lo Yankel, dem Alef Beis. In der Rebbe lernt kleine Kinderlach, dem Alef. Hello, come in. My first visitors. Nice of you to drop in. I'm Mrs. Bronson, 14B.
14B?
Oh, I didn't get a chance to put my name downstairs in the bell yet.
Well, how did you finally get her up?
I gave her a lease.
You gave her a lease?
Don't worry, leave it to me. I'll get her out. She won't get around me this time. I'll get her out.
Renta fire. Now you try it.
Off and proper job.
Wait a minute, Rachel. I think I got it. Auf en Pripyat brennt al Feuerl in en Stiebes heiß. In der Rebbe lernt kleine Kinderlach, dem Alef Beis.
Hey, Francis, that was good.
There is so much in between all of these performances. Molly performed for soldiers in the USO during World War II. She had an ardent connection to the state of Israel, traveled there often, performed there, and even adopted 2 Israeli children. She starred in a musical on Broadway, and I believe it played in Israel too, but I'm not sure. It was called Milk and Honey, you may have forgotten it, about taking a group of divorced and widowed women over to the Atlantic to Israel to find husbands for themselves. It wasn't a great hit, but it has some colorful moments. Finally, she returns to Poland, this time in the 1971 film A Fiddler on the Roof. She convinced the director to let her play Yente. It was going to be a different kind of Yente, though, than the one that was played on Broadway. Not big, brash, pushing around, not that kind, but Molly Picon's Yente. The portrayal of the shtetl finally returns to film for the first time since 1938. But this time, the shtetl is no more. What's a stove? What's a house? A little bit of this, a little bit of that, a pot, a pan, a broom, a hat. Someone should have set a match to this place years ago. A bench, a tree. So what's a stove? A house. People who pass through Anatevka don't even know they've been here. A stick of wood, a piece of cloth. What do we leave? Nothing much, only Anatevka. Underfed, overworked, Anatevka. Where else could Sabbath be so sweet? Anatevka, intimate, obstinate, Anatevka, where I know everyone I meet. Soon I'll be a stranger in a strange new land, searching for an old familiar face from Anatevka. I belong to Anatevka. Tumble down, work a day, Anatevka. Dear little village, little town of mine. Oh, it's just a place. But our forefathers, maybe that's why we always wear our hats. Molly Picon became known especially for the depictions of meeting and sometimes clashing between members of different Jewish communities, Jews of different generations, Jews from the United States, and Jews from the Old Country. Characters who remained devoutly religious and those who embraced secular modernity, and more broadly, Jewish tradition. and modernity. She was also known and adored for her comic cross-dressing, playing the mischievous little boy. Picon often played the role of a young boy or a girl disguised as a boy, as could be seen on stage in such plays as Yankele, Schmendrick in 1924, and Hello, Molly in 1929, and on screen, as you saw in Ost und West and Yidden-Mitten-Fiddle. At 50, Picon somersaulted again as the 13-year-old Yankele, as she would again at the age of 80, as Robbie reminded me. Deep down within me, she says, I was Yankele. I still am. Many of her performances combined both of these themes. The romantic coupling of former klezmer performers in urban formal wear and the musical merger of East and West indicate that even as Picon's character leaves the shtetl and traditional Jewish mores about female performance behind for a modern life in the New World, she continues to be drawn back to her Yiddishkeit. Here and elsewhere, her cross-dressing serves more broadly as a metaphor for the social changes, assimilation, altered gender roles, and cultural adaptation be experiencing by the audiences that came to see her. It was also a potent way of depicting the growing opportunities of Jewish women in the modern cities of Europe and America that were home to her largest audiences. Ultimately, as an American Yiddish performer, she never forsook her American roots or her Yiddish heritage. Her devotion to both cultures made her a unique force in the American and Yiddish imagination.
A bissel Sonne, a bissel Regen, ruhig Gott dem Kopf zu legen, a biegesinnt, kann man glücklich sein. A Schuch, a Sock, a Klein und Lottes, a Käschene, a drei, vier Lottes, a biegesinnt, kann man glücklich sein. Die Luft ist frei, für jeden gleich. Die Sonne, die scheint für jeden einem Arm oder reich. A bissel Freude, a bissel Lachen, einmal mit Freund a Schnäpsel machen, a biegesinnt, kann man glücklich sein. Eine sucht a Schieres, eine sucht Gewieres, einem in die ganze Welt. Eine meint, das ganze Glück hängt nur ab in Geld. Na, sollen alle suchen, sollen alle kriechen, nur ihr tracht bei mir. Ich darf das euch Pores, weil das Glück steht bei mein Tier. A bissel Sinn, a bissel Regen, ruhig auf dem Kopf zu legen, a biegesinnt, kann man glücklich sein. A Schuch, a Sock, a Klein und Lottes, a Käschene, a drei, vier Slottes, a biegesinnt, kann man glücklich sein. Die Luft ist frei, für jeden gleich. Die Sonne, die scheint für jeden, arm und nur reich. A bissel Freude, a bissel Lachen, einmal mit Freund, a Schnäpsel lachen, a biegesinnt, kann man glücklich sein. Take it, Nat. A bissel Sinn, a schuch, a zok, a klein und lattes in Geschene, a dreifels lottes, a big gesinnt, kann man glücklich sein. Die Luft ist frei, für jeden gleich, die Sonne, die scheint für jeden einem, arm oder reich. Ja, a bissel Freude, a bissel Lachen, mal mit Freund ein Schnäpsel machen, a wie gesinnt kann man glücklich sein. A wie gesinnt kann man glücklich sein.
Thank you all. Thank you very much. Thank you, Nat. Thank you, Judith Stillman.